welcome everyone to Anna Raftery's video TAF trip report.
Hello, welcome.
Yes, so I'm John. I won TAF once. I volunteered to host interviews with the lovely Anna, but realistically, it's not at all about me. It's about Anna. So let's start at the beginning. What made you decide to run for TAF?
You and Claire. You and Claire Briley.
Excellent.
I think the first time we spoke about it was at LonCon. That seems about right. Or possibly very, very vaguely before that. But at LonCon we had a slightly more serious discussion over several beers. I didn't run that year. Because of, family, because of my dad. And then, it must have been a couple of years later, there was another westbound race. Is that right? Yes.
Yeah.
I can tell directions. I got another email just saying, we still think that you are cool and other people might think you are cool. You should go and be cool. And sorry, I'm just going to be seeing the names of people joining and going, ooh.
That's fair. That's entirely fair.
And so kind of mentioned it again. And that year, for the 2016 Worldcon, one of the guests of honour was Tamora Pierce, who has kind of always been one of my favourite authors. And so I had a conversation with Dad and the rest of my family, and basically Dad was like, it doesn't really matter what's happening with me, this is a amazing opportunity and you should go for it. And I'll tell everyone that they need to vote for you because I have cancer. So, what are you going to do at that point?
I mean, that is an aggressive campaign strategy, which ended up working out well.
It totally worked.
Yeah, you won.
Sorry, well,
so you
that's
won?
my phone.
Yeah, I will take it away from you.
Oh, is my phone
so you don't get disturbed.
Oh, okay. Good plan. Sorry. So, interrupted by a rogue hog.
By a rogue Scotsman.
Yes.
No, so you won in 2016 and you went to Mid-Americon 2. And there were back-to-back westbound trips in 2015 and 2016 because of Helsinki.
Yes.
So yeah, I think we were badgering you to run in 2015 and you decided to run in 2016.
Yes.
And yeah, there are emails. I tell you that I would be happy to nail my colours to your petard. Great metaphor, which I'm very proud of. So how did you find the process of running for TAF? Did you find it difficult or was it sort of something that was just happening in the background?
I think it's a difficult... The problem is, and this will probably, it might not come up much over the conversation of the actual trip, but the entire thing is going to be linked to the fact that in January is when Dad died. And so for quite a lot of the time I was actually running, a lot of the things that I had hoped to do, like things I planned to write, or like talking to people or doing all those kind of planning things, just didn't happen because he was very sick, and then obviously he died, and that was really hard. That was it was a weird experience, kind of having the same things happening. In some ways it was good because it was almost like a distraction. Like that was a really positive thing that I could look forward to. It was a positive thing that Dad was excited that I was being involved in. Most all the UK people who are on here, and most Eastercon people and Filka people will obviously have known Dad and know how irreverent he was and all that kind of stuff. So we knew that he would always have wanted me to do it, but there was always that kind of link. And I think I ended up doing most of my actual, just because of that, I did most of my actual like promotion during Eastercon that year, which I think was in Birmingham or Manchester.
Oh gosh, I thought it was 20.
No, the year before was in London.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
In 2016. It was that hotel that had a thing like really high up, like a restaurant at the top of the tower.
Manchester.
Anyway,
Manchester Hilton. Because
Manchester,
there's
it was
the bar at the
Manchester.
top with the model of the Hilton and the clouds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't go to that bar. I just heard about it from other people. But yes, I remembered that there was a bar in the top of a very tall building.
The real ale was middling.
Okay. But yeah, it ended up being a weird thing. I think I might have confused or freaked out a couple of people who were surprised when I was like, well, my dad's final wish was this. Which he literally, like, one of the, not obviously one of the last things, but one of the last conversations when he was fully lucid, he was like, do you want me to go and tell people this? And ironically, literally the last thing he was able to do before he wasn't able to do anything, he was voting for me. So
Which is,
I think, yeah, but I definitely think I took a couple of people aback with that. And I was like, oh, it's true. But yeah, so the actual process is a very weird thing. And I think I then got very, very detailed and very into the planning again, as it's a kind of distraction from things. But yeah, the running was, it was fun, but I can't really remember a lot of it for obvious reasons.
That's fair. And
Yeah.
you were nominated by me and Claire, who you mentioned earlier, and Gareth Kavanagh and David Weingart and Christina O'Halloran. And I think you stayed with David and Christina on your trip. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I stayed with Chris. I didn't stay with Dave when we were in New York, no. I stayed with Marav in New York. New York, even though it was the beginning of the trip, ended up being the last thing that was actually organised.
Okay.
I think it was only literally a couple of weeks before I went where I actually finalised where I was staying, which was a bit stressful.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it was one of the shorter legs, I think, in some ways.
Yeah, there's I have your itinerary on my computer, and you stayed in New York from the 22nd to the 29th of July. So you were there for a week at the start. But I think at the start of the trip, everything's going very quickly. Did you find when you were on your trip that I know when I was on my trip, I found that it went much, much more quickly than I expected it to. Did you find it all was a blur?
Yes, very much so. I think there was a point later, I think it was probably San Francisco, so kind of midway, where I just had a moment where I could not talk to anyone, could not do anything. I just needed some time. But yeah, it was very full on, in a positive way. But yeah, complete blur. And I'm hoping, going through this process of looking at all the old photos and Facebook posts and emails and stuff, I'm remembering a lot of things, which is very good. Because part of me was worried. I was like, will I remember anything? Because yeah, I mean, the other side, again, this is that my disclaimer, my excuse for not having done this is at the end of 2016 is when my mum had the stroke. And so since then, the last
Yeah,
how many years?
there are
3 years, 4 years have been just kind of so focused on
Yeah.
that, and so it's that very much like it feels like it was like last year, but it also feels like it was 10 years ago. And
No, and certainly there are past winners who have not done their trip report in a timely fashion that had far less good reasons for not doing so. I count myself in that
there's
number.
so much good intention, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean that is entirely fair.
Mhm.
So you set up a blog before you went on TAF.
I think I did
Uh,
1 or 2 posts.
two posts, and I think no, but I don't mean to. I will say that when I was on Wide, I blogged every day. Well, I say blogged. I
Mhm.
wrote a diary every day at the start. The first 3 days, I was on it, and then by the end, I was like in Peterborough 3 weeks later, trying to remember what had happened by like going through my ribbons from World Cup, being like, what
Yeah.
did happen? So I think this is entirely understandable. But you write about your anxiety and your thoughts
Mhm.
about traveling with that part of you. And I found it really interesting because I suffer with anxiety as well. And you
Mm.
talk about kind of touchstones and ways to stay sane. Did you
Mm.
find that writing all that down before you went helped you control that?
Yeah, I think it meant that I acknowledged a lot of the things I was worried about beforehand, instead of just kind of ignoring it and hoping it would be fine. I really thought about like, okay, this is going to be stressful. I am someone who is fine traveling alone, obviously, and it's fine also doing things alone. Like in New York, I actually spent most of it alone. Like I there were only a couple of times I like spent time with people. Most of the time, I was actually like just going out for the whole day on my own, and that was fine. But yeah, I think trying to verbalize, well, not verbalize, write down my worries did help when I remembered them. And sometimes I forgot, which is, when you get those times of anxiety on the trip. But I always knew it was going to be something that was stressful. And I think also at the time, it was the first time I'd actually properly looked at my mental health that year. Because before that, I never really thought about it. It was very much like other people that I'm close to have depression or anxiety or whatever, and I need to support them. But I never really kind of reflected back on myself. And it was during that year when I was kind of starting to deal with the grief and bereavement that I was like, actually, there are some other things below that. It's not just that. And so probably just because I was thinking about it so much, writing it down helped. Yeah. And just writing down everything. So I think I called it, like, one of the things was about a to done list or something.
Yes.
So it's just like, if I plan everything, then even if it doesn't go to plan, like, I'm in the best position possible to deal with everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it does. It massively does. So moving on to the process of winning. So we talked about you running, and we talked
Yes.
about all of the things that were swirling around, but how did you feel when you found out you'd won?
I am actually a bit bad. It was like a midnight announcement or something. It must have been, because normally it's around midnight. And then it takes a couple of hours to go through, because I remember we were getting a lot of emails from Kurt and from
Jim?
Yes. Oh my God! I just had. He's probably watching. He'll tell me off later. Kurt and Jim, just saying like, this is ridiculously close. And I know Wolf was staying up too, and so I was running against Wolf von Witting, who's someone who's been established fan for a long time and very much in fanzine fandom, which obviously I think Claire described it as I'm fanzine friendly. And I
Yes.
knew it would be a very tight race, and it was completely someone who is would have been worthy of going. But at the time, I just was completely exhausted and I couldn't stay up, and so I had to go to bed and go to sleep. And so it wasn't until the next morning that they, like Jim and Kurt, could make the announcement and tell me and Wolf and tell me that I'd won. And so I did feel really bad that he had to wait all night and then didn't win. But yeah, it was surreal, I think, is possibly the way. Like, I knew it was really close, but I don't think I was actually expecting it to happen. Like, I really wanted it to happen, and possibly because I wanted it so much, and it was the kind of, I needed that like positive thing to happen that year. I like wanted that so badly, for like personal reasons. I wanted it because of like Tomorrow Pierce. There was like so much riding on it that I kind of had to convince myself I wouldn't get it, because otherwise it would have been too much. So I don't think it took a couple of days before it really sunk in. So I don't know how excited I was on the phone when I finally spoke to Jim, and it was probably like, oh, that's nice. And then a few days later, it was like, wait a minute, oh my God. So yeah, winning was amazing and really surreal. And a really, I was going to say honouring, that's not the word, touching. I was really touched and in some ways humbled, I guess, that people thought that I was worthy of something like that.
Yeah, I don't think I ever doubted, but I was glad that you won.
That's good.
So, as I said, I've got your itinerary, and you went to New York, Toronto, Seattle, San Francisco, Las Vegas, and Kansas City for the World Cup.
Yeah.
So, what made you choose to go to New York? What was it about New York that made you? I assume New York City rather than the rest of the state.
Yes, I think I was staying over the river. I think I was staying in New Jersey. I don't know. I mean, I'm
New
from
York sounds
London,
better.
so to be perfectly honest, it's the case of like, I mean, outside my geography's crap here. Like, don't even talk about another country. But yeah, I think New York was always on my trip for the practical, boring reason of I also knew that I wanted to go up to Toronto, but having the first leg of the trip shorter, the first international flight shorter, that appealed to me. And also I'd never been to New York, and it was somewhere where I thought I would feel comfortable, like because it ended up being a couple of the things that I planned to do fell through, and everything was a little bit last minute. It meant that I had the most free time when I was in New York. But it was also because it's kind of a big city and there's like public transport and this and that. I felt very comfortable there in the same way I do growing up in London. So I think that it felt like it was a safe place to start the trip that would feel comfortable. And also in the end, I stayed with Merav, who's someone who I have, Jersey City. Thank you, Emily. Jersey City. It's also on bus from central New York City, but I think I got the, they don't call it the tube, the underground.
Metro, maybe?
Do they call it the metro? No, there's like, I know, that's the, somebody will tell us what it's called and we'll feel stupid. But yeah, so it was really easy to get around from there. But I've also known Merav even though I hadn't seen her in God knows how long, because that's how it works in fandom. You have really close friends you don't see for five years or whatever. But I'd known her since I was probably a teenager, at least like 18 years old or something like that. And so again, that felt like a comfortable, like I actually knew her.
Yeah.
So that was really nice.
And did you? So I know that you are
Subway.
That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you are from kind of a Filk background. So is Merab someone you knew from Filk?
Yes. So I knew her from Filk, although obviously I'd seen her I think I'd been to one other US con, Chicago, WorldCon a few years before.
Yeah. 2012.
Yes, exactly. So I'd seen her there, but I did know her from the Filk world. Yeah. So,
because I don't know, obviously Alison Scott has just won Guff, and she is also someone with a yes, congratulations to Alison. But how did you find, so you described yourself as fanzine friendly, and obviously the fan funds kind of going back to 1952 have been sort of have grown out of fanzine fandom, but I think in recent years they have been broadening into different segments of fandom, into like the big tent. So how did you find running as someone with a Filk background? Did you find that Filkers knew what TAF was? Did you find they were interested in finding out, or how did that all slot together?
So in the UK, I should say in Europe, we have a kind of Filk community in the UK and Germany, or the kind of established communities, although we are, after kind of European Worldcons especially, we get more people, which is really awesome. In the UK, a lot of the people who have been in kind of Filk since I started when I was 15 were going to EasterCon every year, or going to the other kind of big UK cons, like going to Discon and all these other cons. And like we're still an established part of the wider EasterCon SFF community in the UK. In the US, there is definitely, again, there's that same crossover. It's obviously much broader, and there are cons all over in different states. But again, most of those people also go to other local conventions, also go to other, go to the WorldCon. And so it's a case that they never really, no, that's not right. There wasn't necessarily much of an engagement previously, unless there was already that engagement, if that makes sense. But most of the people knew what it was when I was speaking to them. So actually it meant that quite a lot of like my Fanish family that I spoke to, because most of my Fanish family at the time and over the last few years like started from Filk, they I forgot what I was going to say. They knew what it was, but they were very supportive, and it was a case where I kind of had a little bit of a tapped resource, if that makes sense. Like it's people who have been going to EasterCon since, you know, time immemorial for some of them, but now
I think
I should close the chat because I keep getting distracted by
it. I think when you ran for the funds, one of the things I hoped would happen was that people who went to EasterCon but hadn't necessarily interfaced with the funds would be brought into fan fund fandom almost by you running, and I think that happened to a large extent.
I think thinking of it as fan fund fandom is a really good way of thinking about it, because I think that it means it can be a broader thing. It doesn't have to, like, of course it's important, as all parts of fandom are, that we must always have navel gazing and know where we came from. But at the same time, I think having an appreciation, like I was speaking about fandom things recently to someone who is younger, and fandom is now just a phrase for a thing you like.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I'm in the fandom. And I was like, I understand that, and I think it's great. But also, actually, this is the history of that.
Yeah.
And like, how I think that's really interesting how it's changed. But I love fandom. I'm kind of a fandom fan, and I'm also a fan fund fan. I think the fan funds are brilliant. Like, whenever I do that crazy thing of like, if I won the lottery, this is what I'll do with all the money. There's always a portion that's like, I'll give this much to the Filk Fund, and I'll give this much to all of the fan funds, and I'll do this and I'll do that, because it's such an important part. Like I said, possibly because I grew up in Filk fandom, we have the Filk Fund, which is about supporting people in the community if we want to bring over more guests, if there's like a special year, a special anniversary, or if actually somebody needs a loan in order to record a CD, then there's that resource for that. And the whole idea is it's the community supporting the community.
Yeah, and I think that sense of community is something that pervades sort of Filk fandom and wider fandom, Eastercon fandom, Worldcon fandom. I think generosity and community is one of the hallmarks.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So you went to New York. So where did you fly from?
London. Heathrow or Gatwick.
Okay, and how did you find, like, was it, because I got to the airport 4 hours early for my TAF trip. I was so excited.
Probably. But see, I'm also one of those people. I'm purposely not opening the chat so Andrew can't mock me. But I am it's an international flight, you arrive 4 hours early. That's just standard. It's nothing to do with the trip. Or minimum 3 hours early. But yeah, so I probably arrived at least 3 hours early, if not earlier. Sometimes it's a case of just arriving early so you can like plan to get dinner or lunch or breakfast or whatever, depending on the time of day, I guess. I also, what I decided to do for the 2 longest legs, so the trip from the UK to New York and then from Kansas City back to London, is I found the cheapest flights, or like the best price that I could, and then out of my pocket I paid the difference so that I could go for the like economy plus or like something like that, so I had a bit more comfort. And I was like, well, this is, so basically sent to Jim, this is the price for it, I'm going to pay the difference because I want to I know it's going to be stressful, so having a little bit more. It's the only time I've ever done that. It was great. Felt very fancy. So yeah, the trip was really nice. I seem to remember I had a nice comfy chair, had some food. I think you get like proper cutlery and stuff like that. It's amazing.
Excellent. And then you were in New York, which is clearly the highlight.
Then I was in New York, and then I wasn't picked up at the airport. I think that's the only place I wasn't picked up at the airport. So I then had to get with all of my luggage, because I think I had a massive backpack, a suitcase, and a handbag. I know I had I had so much.
I have a photo of your
it's
packing.
Very colourful, right?
Yeah, red polka dot, or well, white polka dots on red background, kind of hard case, and then a giant kind of aubergine coloured carry-on, and then a lovely teal shoulder bag.
Yeah. I was like very purposely. The shoulder bag, okay, this is a diversion, but part of the trip. The shoulder bag was the bit I'm most proud of for packing for the carry-on, because it fits the iPad and like my DS, and like it's very much a kind of TARDIS bag. You can fit so much in there, but it's exactly the size of an iPad. So now I had like everything.
Now I know that bag fits an iPad in, I am beginning to realise how large the 2 bottom bags were, because the
purple bag was the exact biggest size you could take as a carry-on for the small, like I planned to the detail. So I think one of the flights was Delta or something, and they have a very slightly smaller cabin bag allowance. And so I like checked all the allowances for weight, for cabin bag size, for all this stuff, and made sure that all of my luggage fit perfectly, all of that stuff. I was very careful. Yeah, it was completely ridiculous.
That's fair.
But I had to then go with this massive suitcase and massive backpack and handbag to Jersey City using the subway. And yeah, that was interesting. I think that was really surreal, because it was really warm, and even though I kind of consciously know that New York gets very hot, obviously I just wasn't kind of expecting it for some reason.
Yeah.
So it was like really warm, and then having to get the subway, and the weird slight differences of the subway from the tube and things like that. And then also the fact that there are sometimes just police with guns around, which isn't something I kind of have gotten a bit recently, but it wasn't something I was expecting. It was just like really weird small things where I was like, it was just the most surreal. It was possibly one of the surrealest things, having to get there and then dump all my stuff. And then I think that night, sorry, that was not very nice audio. I think that night they had managed to get tickets for one of the last shows of Hadestown off Broadway.
Okay.
Which was amazing, but I was so tired. It might have been the next night, but I think it was like right at the beginning of my trip. So yeah, first I had to manage to get there and dump all of my stuff, and then the first thing I'm more conscious of, because I was in a bit of a haze, was going a really long walk of a way to get to this place, because they wanted to show me the lovely scenery, and I was so tired. I just really didn't want to go on along. And I was trying so hard to be polite, but it ended up being fine. And we went to see Hadestown, which was phenomenal.
Excellent.
And is one of my favourite shows of all time now. And when it came over to the UK with some of the same actors, we went to see it for Emily's birthday, so that was really amazing. So yes, that was my first day was that.
It sounds like a ride. It sounds like an adventure.
Yeah.
What were you looking forward to most about New York? Did you have any preconceptions about what it was?
The food.
Excellent. I can get behind this.
The shows. So I saw Hadestown, and then later on I saw Fun Home. I went to see that on my own, and that was really, really great. But I literally looked up all of these, what is the most New York food you can get. And so there were a couple of times I specifically went out on a pilgrimage to this one bakery that is supposed to be the best place, or the place that invented the black and white cookies. I think they're also called moon cookies, moon pie, something. But it's a black and white cookie, like a black and white biscuit. It's kind of softer than a shortbread biscuit, basically, and it's got chocolate icing and white icing, and it is a really iconic New York thing, which I'd never heard of, but apparently it's iconic, and therefore I went to that bakery, and I ended up lining up with these lovely two little ladies who had been traveling from some other state, and this is their first time that they had gone to New York as well, and so we kind of ended up sitting together and having our cookies. It was great. And I went and found the place that was rated the best for the big massive slices of pizza and all that. So yeah, food was food was the
Excellent.
thing I had planned the most for.
I've looked it up, and they are half moon cookies,
Half moon
black and white cookies. So
Half moon
yeah,
cookies, yeah.
and they look good. I'm gonna have to have them if I ever get to New York, I think.
It was excellent. Also, one of the best places to have a breakfast bagel, but one of the top places was in Jersey City, and so I walked down there on my last full day, got that, and then walked to, is it Liberty Park? There's a park that overlooks Jersey City where you can see the Liberty Island and the Statue of Liberty. So I went and got the breakfast sandwich and then walked down, and then went and did that, and that was like my last day there.
Excellent. And what did you do much touristy stuff? I assume you did, but like, what did you get up to while you were?
I think there were a couple of things I thought about doing and then ended up not, because even though I was there for, was it 5 days in total?
7, I think. Maybe, well, six, probably 7 nights, 6
but
days.
Then but the kind of the days on the end were flying, and so I didn't really get to do much else on those days. So there was a day we went to Central Park, which was really cool, and literally just walked around, and nice. Wasn't something I was expecting, like as much as you see it in films and all this kind of stuff. It's and my expectation would be it's more similar to going to Regent's Park or whatever in London, but it's just so vast that I just was kind of blown away by that. And again, it was roasting the whole time I was there. So that was really lovely, and I walked around. I did a lot of walking. It's so easy to walk there. It's a grid.
Yeah.
I was like, just like so easy. So it was very hard to get lost, which I appreciated. So I saw Times Square, which is tiny. Times Square
really?
is tiny. Yes.
But it looks so big.
I know. It's so tiny. And I was like, wait, what? I'm really sure I walked completely past it and then was like, wait, oh, it's there. And Broadway is also like, I kind of forget. So for the West End, it's like an area, but Broadway is like this street, and that's it. And I was like, oh, wait, what? So there are lots of those kind of things, touristy things. I went to, there is this, sorry, this is a thing I want to quickly look up. One day we went to this one restaurant, which was something and Daughters.
Something and Daughters.
I'll look it up in a moment. But basically, it's like one of the really traditional and like a restaurant that's been there for a long time that does kind of bagels and lox and
Russ and Daughters.
Russ and Daughters, yes. So Merev took me there. It was Sarah's sister's birthday, I think, while I was there, and so they took me as well. And they always go, and it was like proper New York bagel, as I said, food.
Yeah.
There was a proper New York bagel, and then learning that a New York bagel isn't like cream cheese or schmear or whatever and lox. It's also red onion and capers and tomato, and it's like it's more than that. And so that was a really kind of fun experience. Excellent. As well.
Did you, when you were in New York, did you get to see much local fandom out there, or was that kind of, who else did you get to see from?
So I got to see Batya, who's another Filker fandom. I was supposed to try and meet up with Meg and Will Frank, but they had just moved to they just moved somewhere, probably Brooklyn, and I think were really busy and unavailable. I think I was also supposed to try and meet up with Dave Weingart, but he was really busy because he was, I think, heavily involved in Mid-Americon, and so it was a couple of weeks before the con. So yeah, there were lots of like talking about trying to do that meetup, and then most of that ended up falling through just because everyone was busy and we didn't have time to set it up. So that was a shame. That was but the thing that, like I said, I ended up having the most free time in that leg. So most of it I spent kind of walking around and finding interesting food and looking at very tall buildings and stuff like that.
There is a photo which I'm fairly sure is you capturing a Charmander in the Empire State Building, I think.
Yes, so I did actually meet up with, I didn't do a group meetup, but I did end up, I've realised I forgot. I was trying to cover it. I forgot. I did end up meeting up with Dave Weingart, I think like on a lunch break from work or something like that.
Excellent.
And it was peak Pokemon Go season. I think it like just come out that year, that summer. Everyone was doing it. And yeah, so I caught a Charmander in the lobby of the Empire State Building. And then we had bulgogi, Korean barbecue, which was the first time I'd had bulgogi, and it was very tasty from a street meat. I had street meat. It was delicious.
Street meat. I only know about street meat from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so now I'm very envious.
Well, it's basically just like there are lots of food trucks and food carts and stuff like that. I think because in the area that we were, it's mostly office buildings, and so you need to get around to where people are going to be for lunchtime. But yes, we had Korean, and it was very tasty. I realised that literally all of my anecdotes are around food.
Oh,
I think the rest of the trip isn't going to be like this.
Boo!
But New York was like mostly about the food. Actually, no, the trip to there are a couple of other peak food moments, but that one was New York was mostly about food.
When I landed in Toronto, Catherine Crockett and Colin Hines said to me, like, what do you want to do while you're here? And I was like, eat things. And they were like, oh, we could do that. But I'm right there with you. The food was a highlight of my trip as well.
Yeah.
So we do have some audience questions. I will invite the chat to pose further questions. But John Purcell asked whether you had to deal with any lengthy layovers during your trip.
No, I think I had one layover in the entire time. I mean, you have my itinerary, which has all the flights and everything. But I think if I had a layover, it was only one. I like I said, I was quite obsessive about checking over all of the flights, and I had started doing some planning a little bit before the end of the trip and everything, before buying the flights, and so I was really careful in my research, and that meant that I could minimize the layovers. And I think the one that I did have was maybe a couple of hours, and so it wasn't that bad. So I planned it quite specifically, also like where I would be able to get a flight from directly, so that helped for that part of the trip.
Excellent stuff. And then I think John has another question. I will unmute him and he will come to us through the power of the internet.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
Haven't seen you since Helsinki.
Yeah.
Looking great.
Thank you. So are you.
Anyway, the question I was wondering was food. I mean, food is a great common denominator between all of us. But did you have to worry about any food allergies in your travels from going to like New York and across around the country and everything? Was that a difference?
So that's not something that the only food thing that I'm actually allergic to is bananas, which is uncommon enough that it's generally okay. And it's also something that is, with most food allergies, it's kind of, now most places do note it, but with bananas, it's kind of advertised because it's normally a plus because they're awesome. I miss them. So basically I just couldn't eat things with bananas in. So that was something I was quite lucky with. And I'm also someone who, I'm very open for trying new things, especially when it comes to food. I don't have many food fears. I'm not a huge fan of peas, but I don't think there was like, that didn't seem to be a thing that was really common, actually, peas. You have a lot more peas over here, I think. So
As John Lennon said, give peas a chance.
yeah.
Ooh.
So personally, I was quite lucky. I am quite lucky that I don't have any food allergies, and it wasn't something that I had to think about. Back then, 2016, I think that if I did have to worry about it, I would have had a lot more trouble. I'm now, it's been something, obviously, with all of this, everything's been put on hold, but we are now looking about whether I have some food things that I need to be careful of. But back then, those halcyon days of 5 years ago.
Hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was fine, but also nobody advertised allergies back then, so it's lucky that I was fine. So yes, to answer your question.
Yay.
Thank you very much, John. I shall remute
All right.
you.
John, if I can make a suggestion, I'm going to turn off my microphone and video. So if anybody else wants to have a question, they can just click onto theirs and do this.
Yes. I don't know whether there are any others. Jerry Sullivan did note that several other people have adopted the same trick of upgrading their flights. Using kind of the baseline cost that they've found and then paying a little bit extra.
Yeah.
I really regret on my trip that I didn't pay a small charge to stay out there longer, because the job I thought I was going to come back to did not materialize.
Yeah.
So I should have just done that.
Yeah, I think I'm glad I did it, the trip when I did, for the reasons I've kind of already gone over. But also, I was in a job I was able to take that time out of, but I'm actually still with the same company and have kind of gotten promoted in the last few years. But at the time I was in a low enough level job that, like, if they kicked up a fuss, I would have probably just found another. Although obviously, again, it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have thought of doing that. I'm more comfortable in a kind of, job is not everything.
That's fair.
Who knew?
One thing that someone has said in the chat is Jerry and Suzel have kind of thrown out a couple of names of big New York fans that you could have visited. One of the things I regret about my Taft trip is that I had to plan it before I went on it, because coming back, I knew about so much more I could have done. Did you have that? Like, were you constantly kind of thinking, oh, if only I'd known?
Yeah, I think also there are a couple of times where I didn't feel confident or comfortable kind of throwing it out more widely, saying, I'm going to be here, let's do a thing. Or asking other people to do that. In some places where I literally didn't know anyone, then I felt it was more, I think nearly always Claire or somebody else kind of saying, hey, it's going to be here, let's do a thing. Or why don't you guys do a thing? And those times were amazing. And like, I wasn't going to do Las Vegas. Las Vegas was completely last minute. and it was ridiculous and so much fun, and I can't wait when we talk about it in however many weeks. But like, I wasn't going to do that, and then a bunch of people were like, hey, come on, let's do it, and we'll plan everything, we'll do it. Whereas I think for whatever reason I had in my head, I didn't want to bother people.
Yeah.
And it was kind of not necessarily realizing people want it's not a bother. Instead of people want to be bothered, they don't find it a bother. Like, if you say, I'm coming, they know you don't know anyone.
Yeah.
They know, there's like, this is the thing. So I definitely think that because I tried to do a couple of things and it didn't work out for New York, and then that didn't really work out, and it ended up being kind of a last minute rush to find out where I would be staying even. I think the biggest missed opportunity probably is the New York trip, part of the trip. While personally I loved it, I think that there was a huge missed opportunity, and there are people which I probably really would have loved to meet up with, who I've since like run into at other cons, or even saw at Mid-Americon and was like, why did we meet up when I was there?
One of my regrets is not going to New York at all, because when I got back, Bill Burns said, "Oh, you should have come to New York," and I was like, "I really should have come to New York," like,
Yeah.
because it's true. Like, I should have done, and I should have met up with them. But
yeah, but yeah, I do. That is, I think, not necessarily my one regret. I still had a lovely time, but I suppose, yeah, the one regret was that I didn't have enough confidence to spread that net wider at that time.
no, and I think that is entirely fair.
Yeah. So it was an interesting start. I think it was a much quieter start than necessarily I'd hoped for. But in some ways maybe that's good, because it was then really intense the next 2-3 legs of the trip. So it was quite a chill food and theatre centric couple of days in New York.
So I asked Claire Briley to give me some questions before we did the video that she thought might be interesting to pose, and the one that sticks out to me for this leg is she asked what the best things you ate on your trip were, which I think we've gone into, but she also asked what the worst things were. So, like, what was the worst food you had in New York?
Sorry.
I didn't mean to make you die. Like, if this is the first trip report where the delegate...
Sorry, that's where the microphone is as well. It wasn't that. Gosh, that was just unfortunate timing and probably fantastic audio. Gosh, I don't know. I think I like some really generic, not very interesting things that were a bit disappointing. But not necessarily bad. I think that actually I honestly can't remember. Like we went to
It sounds like you had a very good eating experience. If you can't think of a worst thing, that must be
well, I mean, I ate things in between the highlights that I said to you. I think I had because I was there for a few days, I did have 3 of a New York slice of pizza. So I had 2 or 3. And I remember one of them was actually kind of awful and ridiculously salty. And it was probably from the most touristy place. I think that was the one in near Times Square, Broadway kind of thing. And it was just, that was probably the worst thing, because it was just really salty and really greasy. And then after having the other 2, when I actually researched and said, okay, where can I find something that's really good, then those were very tasty. So yeah, I think there was the kind of I had a couple of times where it was something really generic or not very tasty. or completely unmemorable. But the cookie, the other pizza, the breakfast sandwich, and the Russ and Daughters. Those are my food highlights.
Excellent.
I still now will do, I mean, we don't really have like everything bagels in the UK, which is a travesty.
It really is.
Oh my God, that's so good.
Yeah.
You can get very good bagels. I mean, in London, there are a couple of places to get very good bagels. If you've got the right pockets of kind of Jewish communities. So have some very good bagels. And I'll still kind of do it with the onion and the tomato and stuff. It's just very tasty. And bring me back to that time.
Nice. Next time I come and visit, I might have to bring like a bag of tomatoes and onions with me and just like look hopeful.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things we nearly always have are tomatoes and onions because it's just tasty food. Yes, we'll need to do a thing where do you know what was a disappointment? A food disappointment was I tried to get a cronut, but I couldn't because the queue was too long.
No, I just heard a Spaniard laugh in like another room in my house. Like,
but that's fine because Dominic Ansell, who invented the cronut, now has a bakery in London next to Victoria Station, which I used to go home, and so I have now had many cronuts from the London bakery, which is
so you went on your TAF trip with visions of cronuts, and then you had to wait until you were commuting home to have one.
I can just on my walk home. It's a bit of a detour, but yeah.
Alison Scott asks, "Are cronuts good?"
They are overhyped. I mean, it's almost like an experience. They're overfilled. It's like a ring donut, but it's filled, and it's obviously like a croissant, very flaky, and they are very tasty. But I think quite a lot. So you don't necessarily want more than maybe half, or.
Yeah, that's fair.
It was it's filled too, and they're my favorite. But like messy, it's like a gooey. It's like a ganache or a cream or a thing. They are very good. Actually, I'm kind of craving one.
I'm so sorry.
In the UK, in this one bakery is the only place in the UK, but they change the flavour every month. And so there was a time where every month I would make sure to swing past, and it was very tasty. Very tasty.
Excellent stuff. Well, on that bombshell, I think we have hit an hour, and I think it is a good place to leave off when you're sort of a cronut high.
Completely unrelated to the trip because I didn't get a cronut there.
It's sort of a good tangent. I like it. But next time we will be discussing your second leg, which is Toronto. So I'm excited to hear, because I also stayed in the same house as you did in Toronto. So I will be excited to ask questions about what your experiences were like of that.
It was so lovely. It was it was a really nice contrast. Sorry to go into it, but it was a really nice contrast almost of the New York of not really seeing many people to just seeing lots of people and having such a lovely time.